"Is that our sister?" the twins asked, and their billionaire father had no words. For years, Graham Ellison raised his twin daughters in quiet luxury, shielding them from the ghosts of a past even he couldn't fully explain. But what happens when a forgotten truth knocks at your gate? Where in your late wife's eyes Rowan never asked to be erased. She was just a baby when powerful hands rewrote her existence, stripped her from the only family she knew. But destiny has a way of circling back. When a chance encounter unearths a buried identity and opens the door to long-locked memories, three sisters must rebuild a bond from the fragments of lies, loss, and love, and a father must decide, can you repair what you didn't know you broke? What secret did their late mother hide in the west wing of the estate? Why was Rowan's name erased from every record? And what happens when the girl you silenced becomes the voice for dozens of forgotten children? Stay with us, because this story isn't just about family. It's about reclamation, redemption, and the power of being found. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you believe some voices deserve to be heard, no matter how long they've been silenced. Now, let's begin. The late afternoon sun bled across the desert sky, warm and heavy like honey. The road stretched for miles dry, cracked, and shimmering with heat waves. Graham Ellison, billionaire tech magnate and father of two, adjusted his sunglasses and glanced in the rearview mirror. His twin daughters, Harlow and Kaya, sat in the back seat, legs folded, earbuds in, watching the same animated movie for the third time. They were identical in every way, from the honey blonde hair tied in twin ponytails to the freckled noses and the way they wrinkled them when annoyed. But Graham could still tell them apart. Harlow had a tiny scar under her lip from falling off a pony when she was 3. Kaya chewed her nails. He had raised them alone since Harper died 7 years ago, and though he had built an empire, the girls were his entire world. The car's fuel light pinged. "We're stopping," he said. Kaya groaned softly. "Are we almost there?" 15 more miles, he replied, pulling into a dusty roadside gas station with a sun-faded Coca-Cola sign and a rickety ice machine that wheezed like it was alive. There were no other cars in the lot, just heat, silence, and the hum of cicadas. "Stay in the car," Graham said as he unbuckled his seatbelt. "I'll grab water." "But it's hot," Harlow protested, already cracking the door. Graham paused, then sighed. 5 minutes. Don't wander." The door dinged behind him as he stepped into the station. The air conditioning was weak but welcome. He grabbed 3 bottles of cold water and a bag of pretzels. When he returned outside, the first thing he noticed was that the back seat was empty. His pulse quickened. "Harlow," he called. "Kaya." No answer. Then he heard their voice, slow, unsure, coming from the side of the building. He rounded the corner quickly, panic flaring for a brief second, and then he saw them. The twins stood frozen, their shadows long against the stucco wall. They were staring at something near the vending machines. No, not something. Someone. A girl. She was curled against the wall, barefoot, wearing a faded hoodie 2 sizes too big, knees to her chest, head down. She looked like she had fallen asleep sitting up, but that wasn't what stopped Graham. It was her face, even with her eyes closed, even in that worn-out clothing. The resemblance was unsettling. Graham stepped closer. So did Harlow, whispering without looking at him. "Dad, she looks like us." Kaya's voice trembled. "Not looks. She is us." Graham stood still, His mind, sharp as it was in boardrooms and acquisition talks, now blanked. His breath caught in his throat. It had to be a mistake, a coincidence, some fluke of DNA that created a stranger who looked just like his daughters. But something deeper tugged at him, something colder. He walked toward the girl slowly, quietly. Her small shoulders flinched even before he spoke. "Hey," he said gently. "You okay?" The girl's eyes snapped open. Hazel, just like Harlow's and Kaya's. She scrambled up, pressing herself against the wall like a frightened animal. "I'm sorry," she said in a tiny voice. "I'm not stealing anything. I'll leave." Graham held up his hand. No, you're not in trouble. I just wanted to make sure you're okay." The girl looked past him. She saw the twins. Her eyes locked onto their faces and didn't move. "They look like me," she whispered. The way she said it wasn't curious. It was quiet, flat, like a fact she had known for a long time. "They're my daughters," Graham said, his voice a bit hoarse. The girl didn't blink. "And you're their dad?" "Yes." She hesitated. "My name's Rowan." Graham took a step back. Rowan, a name like wind. "Rowan," he repeated. She nodded, wrapping her arms tightly around her middle. "I was just sitting here. I'm not trying to cause problems. My grandma used to live down that road, but she died last week. I didn't know where else to go." His chest tightened. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it. Rowan didn't cry. She just stared at the twins, and they stared back. Something wordless passed between them, a echo of recognition that made Graham's skin crawl. "How old are you?" he asked. "8," she said. "I turned 8 last month." So had the twins. Harlow reached out and took Graham's hand. "Dad," she said, her voice barely audible, "why does she look just like us?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. He turned to Rowan, who had looked down again. Her feet were scratched, her lips were dry, her hair was tangled. "You said your grandmother passed away," he asked gently. Rowan nodded. "She used to say my mom was an angel, that she went to heaven after I was born. And my dad—" She hesitated. "She said he didn't know I existed." The words hit Graham like a punch. This wasn't just a coincidence. This wasn't random. This was something else. "Would you come with us?" he asked softly. "Just for today. Somewhere safe. Somewhere cool." Rowan didn't move, but when Kaya stepped forward and held out her hand, something shifted. Rowan looked at it, then at Graham. Then slowly, very slowly, she nodded. "Just for today." Harlow stepped forward and took her other hand, then looked up at her father. "She's our sister, isn't she?" Graham looked at all three of them. His daughters, his daughters. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out, no words, only questions, and behind those questions, a storm that was just beginning to rise. The car ride was quiet, naturally so. Graham kept his eyes on the road, but his mind wasn't in the driver's seat anymore. It was somewhere between disbelief and memory, flipping through years like pages of a book he no longer trusted. His hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles pale, while the air conditioning hummed against the Arizona heat. In the back seat, Rowan sat stiffly between Harlow and Kaya. Her arms stayed close to her body, shoulders slightly hunched, as if she didn't want to take up space. She hadn't said a word since they'd pulled away from the gas station. The girls hadn't either, but they were watching her. Harlow leaned in once, whispering something too low for Graham to hear. Rowan gave a short nod, but didn't speak. Kaya silently slid a wrapped granola bar into Rowan's hand. Rowan held it, unwrapping it slowly, like it might disappear. She didn't eat it, not yet. Graham stole a glance through the rearview mirror and caught Rowan's eyes for a split second. Light hazel, deeply tired, far too old for a child her age. His stomach twisted. He didn't know what disturbed him more, the uncanny resemblance or the invisible weight she seemed to carry. They pulled into the gated driveway of his desert estate just before sunset. The house was modern, all glass and stone, perched on the ridge overlooking dry, endless hills. From the outside, it looked peaceful, safe. But as Graham pressed the garage opener, he knew peace was a fragile illusion. Something about today had cracked its foundation. Inside. The staff greeted them with the usual formality, but their eyes flicked to Rowan. One housekeeper paused longer than the rest. Graham shot her a look, a silent command. "Don't ask." He turned to Rowan. "Would you like some juice or water?" Rowan looked up. "Water's fine." Her voice was careful, practiced, like someone used to survive in rooms full of strangers. Kaya tugged at Graham's shirt. "Dad, can she stay in our room tonight?" Rowan's eyes darted to Kaya. The question caught her off guard. Graham hesitated. "Only if she wants to." Rowan nodded once. "I don't mind." Harlow grinned, taking her hand again. "We'll show her the library later." Graham watched them walk upstairs together, 3 girls, the same height, the same face, the same rhythm in their steps. It was like watching a mirror come to life. Only Rowan moved slightly differently. She stepped softer, looked over her shoulder more. She wasn't used to being looked after. He waited until they disappeared into the bedroom before pulling out his phone. "Dr. Linden," he said when the line picked up, "I need a house visit. Private. Tomorrow morning. Bring your most discreet test kit." The doctor on the other end didn't ask questions. Graham Ellison didn't make casual requests. He hung up, then walked slowly into his study. He sat down heavily at his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a leather file. The folder was labeled Harper, Delivery Records. He hadn't looked at it in years. The day the twins were born still lived in fragments in his mind. Harper had gone into labor 6 weeks early. There'd been panic, alarms, rushing nurses. He remembered the surgical lights, the sharp smell of antiseptic, the way Harper had gripped his hand and whispered, "Promise me you'll protect them." He had, or at least he thought he had. He flipped through the folder. Admission forms, sonograms, a discharge summary from Valley Heights Medical. Everything seemed normal until he noticed a gap. No delivery notes, no neonatal logs. The birth certificate listed Harlow and Kaya, twins born 2 minutes apart. Nothing about a third, nothing about Rowan. His fingers trembled slightly. He'd been there. He had counted them himself. Or had he? Graham leaned back, closing his eyes. A wave of something darker washed over him out. What if Harper had known? What if she'd cried not just from the pain of labor, but from the pain of loss? He thought back to those first few days after the birth. Harper had seemed distant, tired, yes, but something else. Hollow. She would hold the girls and smile. But there was something guarded behind her eyes. He had chalked it up to postpartum exhaustion. Maybe he hadn't wanted to see more. Graham's phone buzzed. A message from his assistant flight rescheduled. Board meeting moved to Friday. "Do you want me to confirm the investor dinner?" He stared at it for a full minute before replying, Cancel everything until further notice. Work could wait. This couldn't. He rose, walked back down the hall, and stood silently outside the girl's room. The door was cracked open. He peeked in. Kaya and Harlow were curled up on their beds, facing each other, whispering. In between them, Rowan sat cross-legged on a blanket on the floor, cradling a stuffed bunny that clearly wasn't hers. Her eyes were half-lidded, but she wasn't asleep. She was listening, watching, still on alert. Graham stepped back quietly. That night, he couldn't sleep. Instead, he sat on the patio just outside the study, watching the desert stars blink overhead. He had built this home to escape noise, to shelter his daughters from the chaos of the world. But tonight, silence was unbearable. He kept replaying Rowan's voice in his head. She said, "My dad didn't know I existed." What kind of father doesn't know what kind of man misses something like that? By the time dawn arrived, Graham had made up his mind. He would find the truth even if it meant unearthing things he wasn't ready to face. He owed it to Harper, to the twins, and to Rowan. Even if she wasn't his daughter, she had already become someone he couldn't ignore. The morning air was cool, but carried that familiar desert stillness, a kind of pause before the heat settled in. Graham Ellison stood at the kitchen counter in his white button-down, sleeves rolled up, watching the espresso machine hum to life. He hadn't slept. Not really. A few hours at most. His mind too full, too loud. Upstairs, he could hear the faint sound of footsteps. Probably Harlow. She always woke before Kaya. He set out 3 glasses of orange juice and paused. 4. He added a 4th. It felt strange. Too soon. Too personal. But she was still here, and that meant something. Rowan had not run. Dr. Linden arrived just after 7. Punctual, discreet, dressed in a muted navy blazer and holding a small silver case like it contained time itself. "Your message was brief," the doctor said as Graham led him into the study. "It's sensitive." Graham replied, "I need full DNA testing, paternity confirmation, sibling comparison, quietly, no lab references tied to the Ellison name." Linden arched an eyebrow, but didn't pry. The subject's Graham took a breath. "My twin daughters, and a 3rd child." Linden didn't flinch. "Understood." "Are samples available? I've already collected swabs while they were brushing teeth," Graham said, voice low, labeled and stored per protocol. Linden gave a short nod of approval. "Results in 24 hours. 48 at most, if the lab routes require encryption layers." "Faster is better," Graham replied. As Linden left, Graham stood at the door for a long moment, his hand resting against the frame. It felt surreal. This wasn't business. This wasn't tech or risk projections. This was something far more fragile. He wasn't trying to win. He was trying to see clearly for once. By the time the girls came downstairs, the sun had begun its steady rise, the dining room filled with natural light. Graham sat at the end of the long glass table, coffee in hand. Harlow entered first, yawning, with Kaya behind her. Rowan followed a few steps back. She wore a borrowed T-shirt, too big for her frame, and a pair of cotton shorts from the twins' extras drawer. Her hair was brushed, though imperfectly, and she had tucked one side behind her ear. She held herself with quiet caution present, but not entirely at ease. Graham stood. "Morning," he said gently. "Morning," Harlow echoed, climbing into her seat. Kaya sat opposite. Rowan hovered near the edge of the room. "You're welcome to sit," Graham offered, motioning to the open seat beside Harlow. Rowan hesitated, then nodded. She sat down slowly. The juice glasses sat untouched for a moment. Then Rowan picked hers up and sipped. "I made pancakes," Graham said. "Well, I ordered the chef to make them, if we're being accurate." That earned him a faint smile from Kaya. Harlow pushed the syrup toward Rowan. "We always drown them," she said. Rowan mimicked the action. Just enough syrup. No more. They began to eat, quietly at first. Then came soft questions. "What book do you like?" Harlow asked. "Have you ever played Nintendo?" Kaya added. Rowan answered in one or two words at a time, still unsure, still measuring the ground beneath her. Graham watched her closely. She didn't fidget. She didn't complain. She asked for nothing. "Rowan," he said softly as they cleared their plates, "would it be all right if we spoke for a moment? Just you and me?" Rowan looked at him, then nodded. He led her to the living room, gesturing for her to sit on the couch. She perched on the edge of it, back straight, feet tucked under the hem of her borrowed shorts. "I wanted to ask," he began, sitting across from her. "How long had you and your grandmother been staying near that gas station?" She looked down. "A few weeks, maybe more. After we got evicted, we moved around a lot." Graham nodded slowly. "Did you go to school?" She shook her head. "She homeschooled me. Kind of. She said strangers weren't safe." The words landed harder than he expected. He leaned forward. "Rowan, this might sound strange, but I need to ask, did she ever mention my name, or the name Ellison?" Rowan hesitated, then she whispered, "No, but she did talk about someone once. She said there was a man with a car bigger than the street, that he wore watches that ticked too loudly. She said he would have wanted to know if he knew." Graham's throat tightened. "She was talking about you," Rowan said, "not as a guess but as a fact. I can tell." There was no accusation in her voice, no blame, just truth sitting between them. He nodded. She said, "People with money forget the small people. But I don't think she hated you. I think she was scared." Graham exhaled. Everything in his chest felt heavier than before. "I don't know everything yet," he said, "but I'm going to find out. I promise you that." Rowan studied him. "You don't have to promise," she said. "I'm used to people not keeping them. That hit harder than anything else." Graham sat back, silent. What could he say? That she was wrong? He couldn't. Not yet. Later that afternoon, he stepped outside onto the veranda while the girls played in the den. From behind the glass doors, he could see them, the twins showing Rowan their favorite tablet games, trying to teach her how to navigate digital dragons and pixelated gardens. Rowan smiled occasionally. It was faint, fleeting, but it was real. He turned to his assistant, Marla, who had just arrived with updates. "I need every document from Valley Heights Medical Center," he said, "especially neonatal records, OB/GYN logs, and discharge summaries from the day my daughters were born. Use legal force if necessary. I don't care what it costs." Marla blinked. "All of them from 7 years ago. Yes, no filters. And I want all records under Harper Ellison's nameful prenatal care history. Every ultrasound, every appointment, even if it's sealed, find it." She nodded, understood, and Marlathis stays between us. Later that night, as the house fell into silence, Graham walked the hallway alone. He paused outside the girls' room again. This time, all three were asleep. Rowan was no longer on the floor. She lay in the middle bed, flanked by Harlow and Kaya, the three of them curled beneath the same comforter. In that moment, they didn't look like three individuals. They looked like one soul, split three ways. He closed the door softly and leaned against the wall. It was beginning, a reckoning, not with the world, but with himself. The sun had barely risen when Graham found himself standing in the upstairs hallway, outside the guest bathroom. Inside, the sound of giggles echoed off the tile. It was a soft, fluttering sound, innocent and brief, the kind of sound that usually came with joy. But this time, it made his stomach knot. He knocked lightly. Girls Harlow opened the door halfway, her face flushed from laughter. "Dad, you have to see this." Graham hesitated, then stepped in. The bathroom mirror was fogged from the steam of an early shower. The girls had cleared a circle in the center, and there they stood, Rowan in the middle, Harlow and Kaya flanking her. They were staring at their reflection. All three wore matching t-shirts now, hair tied back in similar loose ponytails. To someone walking by, they would look like a set of clones. Kaya turned toward him, her smile uncertain. "We really do look the same, don't we?" Rowan didn't speak. Her eyes remained locked on the mirror. Harlow reached out and touched Rowan's shoulder gently. "Even our ears are shaped the same." Graham nodded slowly, forcing a smile. You could confuse the world, but his heart thudded unevenly in his chest, because he couldn't shake the feeling that the world had already been confused on purpose. Rowan caught his gaze in the mirror. She didn't smile. Her eyes asked the same question over and over. "Who am I?" later that morning. Graham sat in his private office, laptop open, legal files spread out across the desk like a battlefield. He scrolled through the scanned documents from Valley Heights Medical Center that Marla had retrieved. Discharge summary incomplete. Pediatric neonatal form unsigned. Delivery record missing, but tucked in one of the corners of a folder marked Archived Imaging. He found a blurry sonogram labeled only by date. 3 small, distinct figures. 3. His pulse skipped. He zoomed in. 3 heartbeats, 3 heads, 3 spines. It was a 29-week ultrasound, dated just 5 weeks before Harper went into labor. So, where had the third baby gone? He pushed the laptop away and rubbed his face with both hands. Had Harper known? Had someone convinced her lied to her into believing only 2 had survived? Or worse, had she been too sedated to know what had happened at all? His phone buzzed. "Dr. Linden." He answered without hesitation. "I have the results." Linden said, "All 3 girls are genetically identical. Monozygotic, same DNA markers, no margin of error." Graham closed his eyes. "Triplets." "Yes," Linden confirmed. "Triplets born from a single egg. Very rare. Almost unheard of without in vitro procedures." Harper never underwent fertility treatments, Graham said. It was natural. "Then this was a biological anomaly," Linden replied, "but an undeniable one." Graham opened his eyes and stared blankly at the window. Outside, the girls were in the backyard, running through the sprinkler system barefoot. Harlow had a bucket. Kaya chased her with a towel. Rowan stood near the patio, watching, not quite joining in, but closer than before. "I'll handle the rest," Graham said softly. "Thank you." After the call, he stayed seated for a long time. The silence around him wasn't comforting, it was accusatory. because the mirror didn't lie, but someone had. That afternoon, he went back to the archives in the far wing of the house, an old cedar-paneled room filled with family photographs, birth certificates, and financial trusts. He pulled out a thick binder marked Inheritance Protocols, Harper Ellison. Inside, among the legal language and financial distributions, was a clause he hadn't looked at since Harper's death. Clause 7.2. In the event of natural heirs born from shared blood, funds are to be divided equally. This includes any known or unknown biological children, confirmed through legal or genetic verification, and beneath it, addendum, subject to hospital-certified birth records. His heart thumped. The moment only 2 names had appeared on those records. The fund had shifted automatically. The clause had been exploited. Someone had made sure Rowan's name never appeared, so her portion could be absorbed. Graham stood up so fast the chair groaned against the hardwood floor. This wasn't just deception, it was theft. The sun had dipped low by the time he walked down to the guest room where Rowan was lying on her side, flipping through a picture book Kaya had lent her. He knocked gently. Rowan sat up, startled. "Sorry," he said. "Didn't mean to scare you." "It's okay," she whispered. Graham stepped in and sat on the edge of the bed, maintaining distance. "Can I ask you something personal?" Rowan nodded. "Do you remember being in a hospital when you were little, or maybe hearing your grandmother talk about someone who visited your mom?" Rowan frowned. "She never talked about my mom much, just that she was sick when I was born, that she didn't make it. I asked once what hospital I came from, but Rosa said she wasn't allowed to say. She told me, 'Not all truths come with safety.'" The words made his skin crawl. Did anyone ever come visit a man? Maybe Rowan stared at the bed sheets. There was a man, she said softly. White hair, fancy shoes. He never came inside the house, but Rosa would watch him from the window. "Once," she said. "He's the reason we have to move again." Graham clenched his fists. "Did he ever speak to you?" Rowan shook her head. He always watched, like he was checking something. Graham's mind spiraled. He had a name forming at the edge of memory. Someone who had access during Harper's hospital stay. Someone who had legal authority. And someone who vanished soon after Harper's funeral. He stood slowly. "Rowan, you don't have to be scared anymore. I promise you that." She looked up. "Even if I'm not supposed to exist." His breath caught. "You do exist, and now that I know, I'm not letting go." Rowan's eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. Instead, she nodded once. That night, Graham sat on the porch in the dark, listening to the wind move through the stone pathways. A warm breeze carried the scent of rosemary and dust. Inside the house, the lights dimmed one by one. He picked up the photo from his pocket, a family portrait, Harlow, Kaya, Harper, taken when the twins were only 4. Now it felt incomplete, not because Harper was gone, but because someone else had been missing the whole time, and she had her mother's eyes. Graham Ellison didn't believe in ghosts. But that morning, as he walked into his study with a fresh coffee in hand and a storm in his chest, he felt haunted, not by the dead, but by the living, by the possibility that he had spent the last 8 years being a father to 2 daughters, while a third had existed just beyond reach unseen, unheard, and unknown. Not because she was invisible, but because someone had made her that way. He sat down at his desk. The sunlight filtered through the blinds in narrow bands. Dust floated lazily in the air, untouched by time. He stared at the envelope that had arrived on his doorstep an hour earlier, unmarked, sealed, and hand-delivered. Dr. Linden's lab results. Graham didn't open it right away. He placed his hand on top of it and just sat for a long time, because once the seal was broken, there would be no more guessing, no more hoping it was just coincidence. The story his life had been built upon, Harlow and Kaya, the twins, the only children, could collapse in a single breath, and yet he owed Rowan the truth. He owed all of them the truth. He opened the envelope. Inside were 2 printed pages, clinical language, tables, codes, but Graham's eyes scanned only for one phrase. Genetic markers confirm a 99.999% match. Monozygotic siblings, triplets. He leaned back in his chair, throat tight, hands still. She was his daughter. Not metaphorically, not emotionally, biologically, completely. A living piece of him he hadn't even known was missing. And no, we couldn't imagine not seeing her face in the morning. That same shaped chin, that same left dimple that only appeared when she wasn't thinking about it. The tiny freckle beneath her right eye that he used to think was unique to Harlow, until Rowan arrived. He set the report down gently, as though it might shatter. Then he pulled open the drawer to his left and took out Harper's old journal, the one she kept during her pregnancy. The pages were filled with neat cursive handwriting, dates, appointments, mood swings, cravings, worries. He flipped to the last entry before the girls were born. Something's not right. She had written, I heard 3 heartbeats at 29 weeks, but the nurse said I imagined it. Then Dr. Reeves told me the files had been condensed for efficiency. Condensed. That's not a thing. Right, I'm too tired to argue. Graham stared at the word, condensed. It had always stuck out to him as a strange note, but he had assumed it was just Harper being poetic, overly anxious. Now it felt like a flare in the dark. He flipped another page. If something happens during delivery, and I'm not awake to know it, promise me you'll check everything. Don't trust what they hand you, not even if it looks official. Paper's easy to lie to. His heart pounded. Why hadn't he paid more attention? Maybe because he'd been too consumed with logistics. Maybe because he'd trusted the system. And now he knew someone had buried Rowan's existence with surgical precision. The question wasn't what happened anymore. It was who made it happen. His mind jumped to the short list of people who had access to Harper's medical records, who had been at the hospital, who had vanished soon after the funeral, and one name glowed red-hot in his thoughts. Bennett Cross, Graham's older brother, his former legal trustee, and the man who hadn't spoken to him since the day Harper died. The memory came back suddenly. Bennett pacing the hospital hallway, tie askew, voice low as he made a call Graham hadn't been meant to overhear. No, only 2 are viable. We'll file the other under neonatal complication. She's not in a state to contest anything, and he won't ask. Trust me. At the time, Graham had been too numb with worry to press it. Now, he couldn't unhear it. He reached for his phone and dialed his private investigator. Lucian, he said, I need you to dig into Valley Heights Medical's neonatal logs from 8 years ago. I want to know who edited the digital records. I want admin access logs, internal emails, and I need a full trace on Bennett Cross financials, passports, property holdings, aliases, everything. Lucian didn't ask questions. He never did. Discreet, he asked. Brutally, Graham replied, and fast. He hung up and stared out the window. The girls were in the garden again. Kaya and Harlow crouched near the lavender bushes, inspecting caterpillars. Rowan stood beside them this time, closer than yesterday, a little more open, a little less curled inward. He watched as Kaya placed a ladybug in Rowan's palm. Rowan smiled. Something cracked inside Graham then. Not pain, not anger, something older. Regret. Later that evening, Graham called Marla into the study. He handed her a printed copy of the lab results and Harper's journal entry. "I need you to prepare a legal timeline," he said. "Backdate every mention of a third child and cross-reference it with the fund disbursement protocols." Marla read the pages, her lips tightening. "This was intentional," she said. "I know. And if we find proof that Bennett had a hand in it, we won't be finding it," Graham said. "We'll be exposing it." That night, as the sun faded into soft hues of coral and gold, he called the girls into the living room. Harlow and Kaya came first, Rowan behind them, hands folded nervously. "Can we sit?" Kaya asked. "Please," Graham said, motioning to the couch. He knelt in front of them not as a CEO, not as someone in control, but as a man trying to get something right. "I need to tell you something," he began. "All of you." The room quieted. "I did a test," he said, "a DNA test. I wanted to be sure, and now I am." He looked at Rowan. "You're my daughter, just like Harlow, just like Kaya. You were born the same day, the same minute. You're triplets." Rowan blinked once. Her lips parted, but no words came. Harlow reached for her hand. Kaya's mouth hung open. "So she's really our sister Graham." Nodded. "Yes, and I didn't know, but now I do." Rowan finally spoke, her voice barely audible. "Are you mad?" Mad Graham repeated. "No, no, sweetheart. I'm heartbroken." Rowan looked away quickly, but he saw the tear slip down her cheek. He moved closer and gently placed a hand over hers. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said. "You're not a mistake. You were never the mistake." And for the first time since she entered the house, Rowan leaned into him. Not carefully, not halfway, but fully. And he held her, his daughter, finally. It was nearly midnight when Lucian's encrypted message came through. "Findings confirmed. Digital tampering, financial trails, offshore movement. Your brother's name is all over it." Graham stared at the screen, unmoving. He hadn't seen Bennett Cross in nearly 6 years, not since the reading of Harper's will, not since that cold handshake that lingered too long and meant far too little. They hadn't parted in anger. Not exactly. But something unspoken had always simmered between them. A history of competition, of control, of power, and now betrayal. Graham sat back in his leather chair, lights dimmed, the house silent. Outside the window, the desert stars blinked faintly above the hills, the kind of quiet that should feel safe, but now it felt like a warning. He clicked open the files Lucian had attached. The trail was surgical. Bennett had accessed the hospital's digital registry system using legal overrides possible only by someone listed as a proxy guardian. Somehow, during Harper's delivery, he'd been granted temporary authority, likely due to a forged consent form signed under duress. That form had declared baby 3 as non-viable due to congenital complications. No attending physician name, no ID stamp, just a removal. Rowan had been erased like a smudge on a mirror, and from that moment on, every financial record, every trust update, every inheritance allocation had moved forward with 2 names, 2 daughters, not 3, not the truth. Graham's jaw clenched as he reviewed the transfer slips, millions redirected, investment structures adjusted to close off contingencies. Even Harper's final estate had been quietly rewritten in the background, doctored signatures, revised PDFs. Bennett had made it look airtight, and yet he'd missed one thing: Harper's handwritten journals, the only piece of unfiltered truth left behind. Graham tapped his fingers against the edge of the desk. 1, 2, 3, like a ticking clock. His thoughts moved fast. This wasn't just a legal violation. This was theft. From a child, from a family, from a mother who had died not knowing one of her daughters had been taken and hidden away under the weight of bureaucracy and greed. He didn't feel rage. He felt something colder: determination. The next morning, the house stirred early. The girls had a sleepover hangover, too many snacks, too many games, and too many secrets shared under blankets. Harlow and Kaya buzzed with energy. Rowan was quieter but more relaxed now, her edges softening, her steps less cautious. Graham watched them from the kitchen, phone in hand. He was calling Bennett. It rang and rang, then connected. Graham. Bennett's voice came cool, confident. Didn't expect to hear from you. How's domestic life treating the prodigal billionaire? Graham didn't waste time. I know what you did, he said. I have the hospital records, the financial redirections, the altered birth certificate logs. Rowan's erasure wasn't a mistake. You signed the removal order yourself. Silence. Then, careful, little brother, you're making heavy accusations. I'm stating facts, Graham said, and I'm giving you one chance to explain before I go public. You have 24 hours. Bennett's voice didn't crack, but it hardened. You really think dragging this into the light helps anyone think about the markets? Your reputation, the Ellison brand. This isn't about markets, Graham snapped. It's about my daughter. A pause. Then Bennett spoke again, voice low and clipped. I did what had to be done. You were unraveling. Graham. Harper was dying, and 3 children that wasn't manageable. Not for you. Not then. Graham laughed, bitter and sharp. So you made the decision for me. I made a decision to protect the legacy. You mean your legacy? She was better off, away from all this chaos. No, Graham said, quieter now. She was abandoned, and you watched it happen. Another silence. Then Bennett said, almost mockingly, What do you want, Graham? A confession. An apology. I want you out, Graham said, out of every holding, every board, every structure connected to Ellison Global. Resign, transfer your shares, walk away. I release every document to the press, to the feds, and to the Inheritance Council. Bennett chuckled. You'd ruin your own family name to make a point. No, Graham said. I'd restore it. He ended the call. His hands trembled slightly as he set the phone down. Not from fear, from clarity. Later that afternoon, Graham called a family meeting. The girls sat in the sunken den, pillows piled around them. Rowan curled close to Harlow, Kaya picking at a granola bar. I need to tell you something important, Graham said gently, something about our family. The room quieted. He began slowly. Someone made a terrible choice when you were born. Someone who should have protected you. He believed hiding Rowan would make things easier for him, and maybe even for me. But he was wrong. Rowan looked up, her eyes calm but steady. It was your brother. Wasn't it? Graham blinked. She'd already guessed. Yes, he said. It was. Will he go to jail? I don't know yet, but he's leaving the company. He won't have power anymore, and he won't be able to hurt anyone again." Rowan nodded. Kaya scooted closer. "She's really staying with us." "Right." Graham smiled. "She's your sister. She's already home, that night, as the sun set behind the hills." Rowan walked into Graham's office quietly, holding something in her hand. It was a photograph, a recent one, of her Harlow and Kaya Tacken in the backyard under the big tree, all three of them smiling with grass stains on their knees. "I want to put this somewhere," Rowan said, "so I remember it's real." Graham got up and gently took the frame. He placed it on the shelf next to Harper's photo. Two women who never met, and yet connected by blood, by love, by one man who had finally seen clearly. Rowan looked up at him. "You're not mad at me for being gone?" Graham knelt, voice low. "No, I'm only mad it took this long to find you." Rowan nodded slowly. Then, for the first time, she hugged him, not out of politeness, but because she wanted to, and Graham held her like he never wanted to let go again. The morning air in Los Cielos carried a kind of crisp finality. The city skyline glittered through the glass walls of Ellison Global's headquarters, clean and deceptive, as if the truth couldn't reach that high. But inside the 48th floor boardroom, truth was already waiting. Graham Ellison arrived early, wearing his signature navy suit, no tie. The absence was deliberate. He wasn't here to impress. He was here to undo what had once been buried under polished shoes and clever contracts. Marla stood beside him, calm and sharp-eyed, her tablet already glowing with legal documents queued for signing. The boardroom slowly filled, executives, shareholders, department heads, and finally, Bennett Cross. He walked in as if nothing had happened. Charcoal gray tailored jacket, that same smug tilt to his chin, like a man who still believed the game was his to win. But something flickered in his eyes when he saw Graham at the head of the table. Not fear, but calculation. Graham didn't give him a moment to maneuver. "Let's begin," he said, standing. His voice was steady, calm, word deliberate. "I've called this special session to announce a transition, effective immediately. Bennett Cross will be stepping down from his position as Chief Legal Officer and relinquishing all board voting rights and trust administration roles." The room stilled. Bennett raised an eyebrow. "That's quite the surprise. I don't recall consenting to a resignation." Graham didn't flinch. "You don't need to. We have the cause." He nodded at Marla, who tapped the tablet. Behind them, the boardroom screen lit up with a timeline, digital record tampering, financial redirection, legal manipulation of birth records, all linked to Bennett's personal login timestamps, private offshore transfers, and one forged consent form signed 8 years ago. The silence that followed was suffocating. Bennett leaned forward slowly, his tone ice-edged. "This is family business. You're airing it here." "This is corporate fraud," Graham replied. "You used your position in this company to eliminate a child's legal inheritance. That's not family drama. That's criminal intent." A murmur rippled across the room. One of the board members, a woman named Celia Grant, cleared her throat. "Is this about the girl who's been living at your estate?" Graham nodded. "Her name is Rowan. She's my daughter. She was hidden from her birthright, from me, from her sisters, for nearly a decade. And my brother orchestrated it." Celia looked down, quietly stunned. Bennett's jaw tightened. "So, this is personal." "No," Graham said. This is overdue." He turned to the room. "You all know who I am. You've watched me build this company from nothing after Harper passed, but I can't lead with integrity if I stay silent about what happened to my own child. If I don't act now, I'm just another man covering up injustice because it's inconvenient." Someone clapped, softly, at first, then others joined. It wasn't loud, but it was enough. Graham turned back to Bennett. "You'll be escorted out today. Severance is void, and the trust you diverted, it's already being reconstructed in Rowan's name." Bennett stood slowly. His voice was a hiss. "You'll regret this." "No," Graham said quietly. "I regret trusting you." As Bennett was led out, the room seemed to exhale. The meeting ended, documents were signed, legal teams were mobilized, but for Graham, it wasn't victory. It was just a beginning. Back at the estate, Rowan was sitting by the koi pond with a notebook in her lap. The other girls were still at school, but she'd asked to stay home. She said her stomach hurt. Graham knew better. It wasn't physical, it was emotional weight. He walked over and sat beside her on the stone edge. She didn't look up. "I know he was your brother," Rowan said. "It must have been hard." Graham didn't respond right away. Then it was necessary. Rowan turned the page in her notebook, doodled a flower, then a cracked mirror. "Is he going to jail eventually?" Graham said. "But that's up to the courts now." She was quiet for a moment, then whispered, "He said I was better off not knowing." Graham inhaled slowly. He was wrong. Rowan's voice cracked. "Why would anyone want to hide me?" Graham looked at her not just as a father, but as a man who had spent too many years accepting systems that looked clean on paper and bled quietly underneath. "Some people confuse control with love," he said. "They think protecting something means locking it away." Rowan glanced at him. "Did you ever wish I hadn't shown up?" He turned fully toward her, voice steady. "I wish I had found you sooner." Tears welled in her eyes. "I thought, maybe if I was quieter, less weird, maybe then I'd fit better." Graham shook his head. "You don't have to change to fit. You're not a puzzle piece. You're a person." Rowan leaned her head against his shoulder, and for the first time since she'd arrived, she let herself rest there. That evening, Marla returned with a large envelope. Inside were the restructured documents, a new trust fund in the Rowan's name, retroactive to her date of birth. Also, inside a notarized letter for the county clerk's office. Graham held it out to Rowan at dinner. "You don't have to," he said, "but if you want to take my last name, the paperwork is here." Rowan stared at the envelope for a long time. Harlow and Kaya looked at her, not pushing, not pleading, just waiting. Rowan's hand trembled slightly as she reached for the pen. "I've always wondered what it felt like to belong to something," she whispered. "I think I'm ready to find out." She signed Rowan Ellison. Kyle whooped. Harlow hugged her from behind, and Graham. He simply smiled and blinked away the sting in his eyes. It wasn't just a name, it was a reclamation of family, of truth, of her place in the world. Rowan had never celebrated her birthday. Not really. There had been no balloons, no candles, no cake with her name scribbled in bright frosting. In the group home, birthdays were mostly forgotten dates marked by a generic card from an overworked case manager or a store-bought cupcake if you were lucky. So, when Kaya and Harlow began whispering about plans, Rowan didn't think much of it, until she walked into the sunroom one afternoon and found the twins crouched over poster boards, glitter glue, and piles of photos, some new, some old, some taken just weeks ago of the three of them lounging in hammocks or brushing the horses. They froze when they saw her. Kaya grinned sheepishly. Oops, busted. Rowan tilted her head. What? Are you making? Harlow stood, brushing sparkles off her jeans. We're planning a party. For who? Kaya looked at her like it was the most obvious thing in the world. For you. Rowan blinked. Why? Because, Harlow said, we've shared every birthday together since we could crawl, but you were born the same day. Just because someone hid you doesn't mean we can't rewrite things. You deserve one, Kaya added, a real one, with everything. Rowan stepped back slightly, eyes wide. Two don't know. That's a lot of attention. We'll go slow, Harlow said. No speeches, no surprises, just people who care. And dogs, Kaya added, lots of dogs. Rowan cracked a smile. I do like dogs. That was all the permission they needed. For the next 4 days, the Ellison estate transformed. Garden lights were strung from oak to cedar. Picnic blankets were laid out near the koi pond. A local bakery delivered a triple-layer vanilla bean cake, decorated with soft gold leaves and 3 names, Harlow, Kaya, Rowan. 1 name new, 1 name restored. On the morning of the party, Rowan stood in front of her mirror, smoothing the pale blue dress Marla had helped her pick out. It wasn't frilly or fancy, it just fit, like it had been waiting for her. Graham knocked on her door, holding a tiny silver box. For you, he said. Inside was a delicate necklace, 3 interlocked rings, each etched with an initial, H.K.R. She held it in her palm like it was a secret. I know it's just jewelry, Graham said, but I wanted you to have something that says you're part of this. Permanently. Rowan nodded slowly. Thank you for seeing me. He blinked. No. Thank you for letting me. The party started just before sunset. Neighbors, friends, and even a few of Graham's employees, those who had stayed loyal during the boardroom storm, arrived with picnic baskets and folded chairs. But the heart of the event wasn't the guest list. It was the girls. Harlow and Kaya bounced between the lawn games and the snack tables, dragging Rowan along with them. At first, she kept a careful distance, half a step behind, eyes cautious. But then Kaya pulled her into a round of cornhole, and Harlow convinced her to join the lemonade stand competition, and somewhere between laughter and the warm pulse of music in the background, Rowan forgot to be guarded. She just was free, whole, loved. At one point, Kaya dragged out a large canvas and 3 small paintbrushes. What's this? Rowan asked. We do this every year, Harlow explained. A tradition. We paint 1 canvas together on our birthday. This year, Kaya added, you get to paint too. Rowan hesitated, then dipped the brush into soft teal and began a spiral in the corner. Harlow added pink swirls. Kaya flicked yellow stars, and together they created something chaotic and messy and vibrant and entirely their own. It didn't matter what it looked like. It mattered that all 3 hands had touched it, that it now held something no one could erase. Later that night, as the guests began to leave and the air cooled into a soft hush, Rowan sat beside Graham near the edge of the garden. They watched Harlow and Kaya chase fireflies with empty mason jars. Rowan's hair had come loose, a few wisps clinging to her cheeks. Her necklace shimmered faintly in the moonlight. She didn't speak for a while. Then, softly, this is the happiest I've ever been. Graham didn't reply right away. He knew words weren't always the answer. Instead, he offered presents. After a long pause, Rowan asked, "Do you think Mom knew Graham looked at her?" Harper Rowan nodded. Graham exhaled. She knew something was wrong. Her journals show it. She didn't trust the hospital fully. She told me once, in the middle of the night, that she felt like a thread had been cut somewhere. She couldn't explain it, but I think, deep down, she felt your absence. Rowan swallowed. "Do you think she'd be proud of me?" He turned to her fully. "I think she'd be in awe of you." Rowan looked down, brushing dirt from her shoes. She was brave. Right. Graham smiled gently. She was the bravest person I've ever known. Rowan nodded. Then, after a beat, "I want to do something. Anything. I want to start something, like a project, for kids who age out of the system, like I almost did. Something that reminds them they matter." Graham felt something tighten in his chest, pride and pain, all mixed together. "Then we will," he said. "We'll build it together." She looked up. "You'd help." He smiled. "Of course. What should we call it?" Rowan thought for a long moment, then whispered, "The Foundlings." Graham nodded. A perfect name, because not every child who's lost is truly gone. Some are just waiting to be found. That night, after the lights dimmed and the guests were gone, Graham stood in his study, holding the finished painting. 3 colors, 3 lives, 3 girls, 1 family. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. The legal cleanup wasn't done. The headlines were just beginning. But in that moment, he knew one thing for certain. Truth had made its way home. And with it, the quiet, unshakable beginning of healing. It started with a single envelope. Rowan placed it gently on Graham's desk one quiet morning as the house still dozed in weekend slowness. She didn't say a word, just gave a tiny nod and backed out of the room, leaving Graham alone with the soft cream paper and a handwritten title in blue ink, "The Foundlings' Proposal Draft." He opened it with reverence, unsure of what to expect, but by the 3rd paragraph, his throat had tightened. Rowan had outlined a vision, not a charity, not a pity program, but a living, breathing space for kids like her. For those who had slipped through the cracks of a system that forgot names and reduced stories to case numbers. For children who aged out of the system with nowhere to land, no arms to fall into. The idea was clear, a transitional sanctuary, a place for healing, education, and community, art therapy, mentorship, storytelling workshops, legal support, a farm-to-table garden, a library, therapy dogs. Graham exhaled. It was everything she never had, and everything she still wanted to give. That afternoon, they sat by the windows, the sun warming the hardwood floors, and talked through the details. "I don't want it to feel sterile," Rowan said. "It has to be lived in, warm, like someone thought about the kids before the blueprints. We'll bring in architects who understand that." Graham replied, "And I know someone at the Ellison Design Foundation who would jump at this." Rowan hesitated. "It shouldn't be a rich people rescue story." Graham met her eyes. "Then it won't be. It'll be your story." She nodded. Slowly. "I don't want my past to be a scar. I want it to be a compass." News of Bennett Cross's resignation had begun to ripple through media channels. But Graham had kept Rowan's identity and what had been done to her quiet. That was about to change. Rowan wanted to tell her story. In her own words, the opportunity came when a national education nonprofit invited Graham to speak on ethical legacy building at their annual gala. He agreed on one condition: he'd bring a surprise speaker, the night of the gala. Rowan sat in the green room with Kaya braiding her hair and Harlow pacing nervously nearby. "You're going to be amazing," Kaya said. "Just breathe." Rowan adjusted the small microphone clipped to her blouse. "What if they think I'm just some kid riding on a last name?" Harlow stopped pacing. "Then make them remember your first name." Rowan smiled softly. "You're getting good at this motivational stuff." Kaya smirked. "We've been raised well." Graham opened the door then, wearing his simple tux and his more complicated heart. "You ready?" he asked her. Rowan stood. "I was born ready," she whispered. Then she laughed. "No, that's a lie. I'm scared as hell." Graham smiled. "Good. That means you care." The lights dimmed. A hush fell over the ballroom. Graham took the stage first, offering a thoughtful, composed talk on ethical rebuilding, familial accountability, and what it meant to tell the truth even when it's uncomfortable. Then he paused. "And now," he said, voice thick with emotion, "I want to introduce someone who changed the way I understand legacy. Not with money, not with power, but with purpose." The audience shifted. "She's my daughter," he said, "and one of the strongest people I know." And then Rowan walked out, hair in a half braid, blue blazer too big at the shoulders but perfect in spirit. She stepped to the microphone and waited until the silence grew full. Then she began. "I was raised in a world where birthdays were forgotten, where last names didn't stick, where homes changed faster than I could unpack my books." Her voice didn't shake. "I was told I wasn't wanted, that I was better off lost, and for a long time I believed it." The audience leaned in, but then someone found me, and not with searchlights or news cameras. He found me with quiet choices, with dinners that didn't ask questions, with a seat at a table that never had to be earned. She glanced at Graham, who sat quietly at the side of the stage, his hands folded, his eyes glossy. "I'm not here to tell a tragedy," she said. "I'm here to build something. Something called the Foundlings. For every kid who aged out and didn't fall in. For every girl who was told her story ended too early." The applause began soft, then grew, then surged. That night, after the gala, Graham drove the girls home under a quiet moon. Rowan stared out the window. "Do you think it mattered?" she asked. What I said." Graham looked at her through the rearview mirror. "It mattered before you even said it." Within a week, donations began to arrive. Small ones, large ones, anonymous ones. But what mattered most were the messages my daughter's in foster care. She needed to hear this. "I aged out at 18. You gave words to what I couldn't explain. I never had a birthday party either." One message stood out, from a 12-year-old in Texas. "Can I live in the place you're building? I'm good at taking care of animals, and I don't eat a lot." Rowan read it aloud and whispered, "We have to hurry." Graham nodded and began assembling a team. That weekend, Rowan asked Graham something unexpected. "Can we visit her grave?" He knew who she meant. Harper. They drove 2 hours to the private hillside cemetery where a single white marble stone overlooked a valley of olive trees. Rowan stood before it in silence. Then she knelt and took a folded piece of paper from her pocket. "I wrote her a letter," she said. Graham turned away, giving her space. Rowan unfolded the page. "Hi, Mom. I don't know if you knew about me, but I know about you, and I want you to know I'm okay now. I have sisters who annoy me in the best ways. I have a dad who doesn't run from hard things." She paused. "I missed a lot, but I'm going to build something from that missing, something good. I think you'd like it." She pressed the paper to the grass beneath the stone, and for a while neither of them moved, just stood together, silent, but full of everything they never had the words for before. The ribbon fluttered gently in the wind-deep green with golden trim, stretching across the cedar gate like a promise. Behind it stood a house unlike anything Rowan had ever known, yet everything she had imagined. Not a mansion, not an institution, but a home. It had been months in the making. Architects, therapists, teachers, social workers all brought together under one principle: the children who came here wouldn't just be sheltered. They'd be seen. They'd be heard. They'd be held. Graham had insisted on no press coverage, no red carpet. "This isn't for photo ops," he'd said. "It's for beginnings." And so, that morning, only a small circle gathered beneath the oak tree's staff members, a few close friends, and the first child who would call this place theirs. His name was Eli. He was 10. Silent, wide-eyed, thin as a sapling. He arrived with a duffel bag and a yellowed copy of The Little Prince tucked under one arm. Rowan met him at the front walk. She didn't say much, just bent to his level and offered him a key. "This one's for your room," she said. "You can paint it any color you want, or none at all." Eli didn't respond, but he took the key, and that was enough. Inside, the house smelled of cinnamon and fresh wood. The walls were lined with framed drawings from Kaya and Harlow. Each room had a reading nook. There were plants everywhere, thriving, untrimmed, alive. The kitchen had an island where 2 stools were already waiting with Eli's name embroidered on soft cushions. A small chalkboard by the dining table read, "Welcome home." "Eli, you're not too late?" Rowan watched him take it all in. He moved slowly, as if the walls might dissolve. When he paused in front of the piano in the corner, she spoke again. "You play." He nodded once. "Play anything," she said. "Any time, loud or soft. It's your song." Later that afternoon, after the others left and the sun dipped low, Rowan sat with Graham on the porch swing. They rocked slowly, no rush, no plans, just the soft creak of the swing and the faint sound of Eli tapping keys inside, hesitant, searching. "He hasn't spoken a word," Rowan murmured. "He will," Graham replied. "When he's ready." She looked out at the gravel path winding through the garden. "You know," she said, "I used to wonder if I'd ever matter to anyone, if I'd just drift through life like a name on a form." Graham turned to her. "You change the course of lives just by showing up," he said. "That matters more than most people ever do." Rowan smiled faintly. "You think she'd be proud, Harper would be in awe." They fell into silence again, but it wasn't empty. It was full of presence. That evening, Harlow and Kaya came to visit. They brought fresh-baked cookies, a scrapbook of the house's construction, and as a surprise, a tiny, floppy-eared golden retriever puppy, barely 10 weeks old. Rowan gasped. "You didn't." Kaya beamed. "His name's Turnip." Eli picked it. Turnip Harlow shrugged. He pointed to a garden book. That was it. Inside. Eli held the squirming puppy like something sacred. And then, just as Rowan turned to say something, it happened. A whisper. Soft. Unsteady. But unmistakably a voice. Turnip's mine. Rowan froze. Eli looked up, eyes cautious. She knelt beside him. "If you want him to be, Eli clutched the puppy tighter. "He doesn't talk either." Rowan smiled, not with words. And in that moment, something inside the boy loosened. A door cracked open. Word spread slowly, as Rowan preferred. No billboards, no fundraisers, just children one at a time finding their way to the foundlings. An older girl named Talia, who had taught herself calculus while living in a shelter basement. A boy named Drew, who built model trains out of scrap plastic and had memorized every Amtrak schedule. A set of siblings, Sam and Jada, who communicated in sign language and insisted on sleeping with their backs to the wall until they didn't have to anymore. Each arrival brought its own rituals, the key ceremony, the garden walk, the blank wall where they could paint a mural or not at all. And each time, Rowan made sure to whisper the same phrase, "You're not broken, you're just still growing." One night, Rowan sat in her small upstairs office, surrounded by sketches, letters from donors, and notes from the kids. She opened a notebook where she kept all the names of residents, former and current. Next to each name, she wrote a single word, not their past, not their label, but their light. Eli music, Talia precision, Drew imagination, Sam courage, Jada grace. She paused when she reached her own name. What word belonged beside it? She tapped the pen, then wrote Rowan Anchor. She stared at the word, let it sit, then underlined it twice. That same week, Graham received a call. It was from a journalist named Clarice Moore, one of the few reporters who had respected the Ellison family's privacy. "I know you're not interested in media pieces," she said, "but someone submitted a tip about the foundlings. We did some research. It's extraordinary." Graham tensed. Who submitted it? She asked to stay anonymous, but it came with a photo, a painting of 3 girls, spirals, stars, blue corners. His breath caught. Clarice continued, "We want to do a feature, but only if Rowan agrees. No sensationalism, just truth and hope." Graham relayed the message. Rowan didn't answer right away. She stood by the koi pond that evening, watching Turnip bark at his own reflection. When she finally turned to him, her voice was quiet. "Okay, but only if I get to write part of it myself." Graham smiled. "She'll love that." Rowan took a breath. "If we don't tell our stories, someone else will." By the end of the month, the article went live, titled simply "The House Where Lost Kids Bloom." It didn't trend, it didn't go viral, but it landed in inboxes, on fridges, in social worker offices and tired hearts. It landed where it was meant to. And sometimes, that's enough. The west wing of the Ellison estate had always been quiet, too quiet. Kaya and Harlow rarely went there. Even as children, they'd tiptoe past its oak-paneled corridor as if the silence might spill over. The housekeeper once said it was Harper's favorite part of the home her sanctuary. But after her passing, the door to that wing had remained closed. Until now. Rowan had passed it hundreds of times since arriving. She'd felt its pull like a string on her ribs, something waiting to be remembered. But it wasn't until Eli asked, "Where's your room when you were little?" that she realized she didn't have one. Not here. Not in this house. And maybe it was time. The next morning, she asked Marla quietly for the key. The assistant hesitated, eyes soft. "You sure?" Rowan nodded. "If I don't go in, I'll keep imagining it worse than it is." The key was heavy in her palm, old brass, ornate, cold. She walked the hallway alone. Her footsteps echoed like memory. When she reached the door, her hand paused on the handle. One breath in. Click. The door creaked open. Dust motes swirled in the filtered light. It wasn't what she expected. No ghosts, no eerie stillness, just a nursery, frozen in time. 3 cribs aligned side by side, pale yellow walls, faded wallpaper with little paper cranes dancing between clouds. A bookshelf still filled with children's books, alphabet blocks, a cracked mobile hanging crookedly from the ceiling. 3, not 2. Rowan's breath caught. She stepped forward and brushed her fingers along the edge of the middle crib. Her name wasn't etched anywhere, but she could feel it. This had been hers. She looked down and noticed a thin line of dust where a picture frame had once stood. She turned toward the vanity on the opposite wall, and then she saw it. A mirror, but not just any mirror. Behind the glass, something shimmered a faint glimmer like light bouncing off hidden silver. Her reflection looked different, not older, not younger, but more real somehow. And then, tucked beneath the mirror's frame, she found it, a folded note, yellowed, delicate, written in her mother's handwriting. If they ever return, tell them I never stopped listening, I never stopped waiting. Even when they said I only had 2 daughters, I remembered every heartbeat. Rowan clutched the note to her chest. Tears welled and spilled. She sank to the floor. She didn't sob. She just breathed through the pain, the kind that had waited its whole life to be seen. That night, Rowan couldn't sleep. She stood on the back porch, wrapped in a blanket, staring up at the stars. Graham joined her, holding 2 mugs of warm ginger tea. I went in, she said. He nodded. The mirror room. She remembered me. He looked at her. She did. He said softly. Rowan's voice trembled. Why did they do it? Why did they erase me? Graham sat beside her. I've asked myself the same question 1,000 times. Was I a mistake? His answer was immediate. No. She turned to him, searching. You were a threat, he said, to their control, to the narrative. Bennett and the others, if you had stayed, the truth would have unraveled. You were too bright to keep hidden forever. Rowan looked away. I'm so tired of fighting to exist. I know, he said, but you're not fighting alone anymore. In the following weeks, Rowan found herself visiting the mirror room often, not to grieve, but to remember. She added her own touches, a painting of a tree with 3 branches, a blanket she crocheted with Kaya and Harlow, and a framed photo of Eli with Turnip licking his ear. It became a quiet place, a healing one, until one afternoon she found Harlow already inside, curled up on the faded nursery rug, flipping through Goodnight Moon. Rowan smiled. I thought you avoided this room. Harlow shrugged. It used to scare me, like a ghost we weren't allowed to talk about. But now, it's not haunted anymore. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Harlow said, I remember when Mom died. Kaya and I were 6. We kept waiting for her to walk back in. Rowan's voice was gentle. You knew she was sick. Not at first. They said she had a quiet illness, the kind that doesn't look like a monster but steals you anyway. Rowan nodded. She wrote to me, in her journals. She left breadcrumbs. Harlow looked over. She loved you? I know. Then, with a wry smile, Harlow said, You're the missing piece. It always felt like something was crooked, like we were a puzzle with one edge chewed off. And now, Harlow said, standing, we're framed right. Graham had one final surprise. He called Rowan into the study a few days later and handed her a blue folder. Officially signed. He said, "Took a few extra steps because of the past documentation." Rowan opened it. Her name stared back at her. Rowan Ellison. Legally, irrevocably. She exhaled. A name she hadn't borrowed, one she'd earned, one she'd always had, even when no one used it. "Welcome home," Graham said. She didn't cry, but something inside her settled, like roots anchoring in warm soil. The following weekend, the Foundlands held its first community day. Kids, donors, local artists, and volunteers filled the gardens. There was a storytelling circle led by Talia, a mini train display built by Drew, a sunflower maze mapped out by Sam and Jada, and in the corner, a hand-painted booth with the sign, "Mirror Room, Stories Share Yours." Rowan manned the booth herself. Anyone could come and speak and be heard. One girl, no older than 9, stepped forward. "My aunt says I talk too much," she whispered. Rowan leaned in. "I think the world needs more voices like yours." The girl beamed, and just like that, the mirror cracked open again, not to break, but to reflect. Not just Rowan's story, but all of theirs. The morning began like most others at the Foundlings. Rowan moved through the halls barefoot, coffee in hand, listening to the hum of early footsteps. Turnip trailed behind her with sleepy eyes and floppy ears, tail thumping quietly on the hardwood floor. Eli had already commandeered the piano room, letting a string of slow notes trickle through the halls like light through curtains. Kaya was outside helping Jada plant strawberries. Harlow had promised to swing by after her weekend photography gig downtown. Rowan paused by the chalkboard wall in the dining room, now full of scribbles, drawings, and scribbled thoughts from all the children who'd come through their doors. At the top, someone had written, "We are not leftovers, we are beginnings." She smiled softly. Then, the doorbell rang. They rarely had walk-ins. Volunteers came by appointment. Deliveries went to the side gate. She glanced at the monitor. A woman, mid-60s, thin frame, gray curls pulled back in a loose bun, standing nervously, clutching a small leather bag. Rowan opened the door. "Can I help you?" she asked gently. The woman blinked several times, her voice shaking. "You're Rowan?" "I am." The woman hesitated. "My name is Evelyn Cross." Rowan froze. The last name was a blade. Cross, as in Bennett Cross, as in the man who helped erase her. Rowan gripped the edge of the doorway but didn't step back. "I'm his sister," Evelyn said, "but I'm not here because of him." Rowan stayed quiet. Evelyn reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. She offered it with both hands, like it was made of glass. "I found these while cleaning out his house after the legal settlements. I thought he destroyed everything, but he didn't. These are your adoption records, photos, and letters from your mother to you." Rowan's fingers trembled as she took the folder. "I didn't know," Evelyn whispered, "about what he did, about what they all did. But I knew Harper. I knew she was being silenced. And I want to help. If there's still a way." Rowan looked at her, measured her, then stepped aside. "Come in." They sat at the dining table while Turnip curled under Evelyn's feet. Sunlight spilled across the pages as Rowan flipped slowly through the folder. There were photos faded but unmistakable. 3 newborns in matching swaddles. One with a tiny smudge on her cheek. A letter, dated 2 months after Rowan's disappearance. "To whoever is keeping her from me. She will remember. maybe not now, but blood has memory, and she will come home." Rowan pressed her fingers to the ink, as if she could feel Harper's pulse in the strokes. "I failed her," Evelyn said quietly. "I was too afraid, too complicit." Rowan shook her head. "You're here now." Evelyn nodded. "I want to donate, but not just money, time, skills. I taught for 30 years, literature and ethics. Maybe the kids would want that." Rowan's eyes softened. "We have a mural wall, still half blank." Evelyn smiled. "I'm better with chalk than brushes." Weeks passed. Evelyn stayed, not as penance, but as presence. She taught morning writing classes on the porch, brought in poems, asked hard questions, listened without fixing. One morning, Eli handed her a hand-drawn comic strip titled "The Girl Who Talked to Ghosts and Made Them Stay for Dinner." She wept for 10 minutes straight. Rowan began calling her Miss E. Graham visited often. The first time he saw Evelyn, his jaw clenched, then softened as she whispered, "I didn't protect her, but I can honor her now." They shook hands like allies, like family who had survived different fires. The foundation expanded, not in size, but in depth. New therapy programs, a mentorship initiative led by alumni, a podcast hosted by Talia and Sam called The Found Ones, where each episode began with "We are not broken, we are rebuilding." Rowan wrote a children's book with Eli's help. It was called Turnip's Day Out, and it ended with a puppy who couldn't bark but could sing in dreams. The publisher called it Quiet Brilliance. Rowan called it Healing. One fall evening, as orange leaves drifted across the garden, Kaya gathered everyone around the fire pit. "We have something," she said, "for you." Rowan tilted her head. "What did you do?" Kaya and Harlow exchanged grins. Then, from behind the greenhouse, came Eli, rolling a large, covered frame. He stopped in front of Rowan and pulled the sheet off. It was a portrait, 3 girls, hair tangled in wind, eyes forward, Harper behind them, arms outstretched, painted in soft light and shadow like memory itself. And, at the bottom, etched in paint, the story found her. Anyway, Rowan blinked rapidly, then hugged each of them in turn. "I don't know what I did to deserve you," she said. Harlow smiled. "You stayed." That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Rowan stood once again in the mirror room, now filled with plants, books, and paper cranes folded by every child who passed through the Foundlings. She held Harper's last letter in her hands and whispered into the quiet, "I found them, all of them, and they found me." A breeze moved through the room, just a whisper, but she felt it. In her chest, in her bones, home, not just a place, but a becoming, and she was finally whole. In the quiet of the nursery where 3 cribs once stood, a name returned home. Rowan didn't need revenge, she needed belonging, and through courage, compassion, and quiet resolve, she reclaimed more than her identity. She created a haven where no child would ever feel invisible again. From the silence of erasure came a symphony of second chances, children who speak, sing, build, bloom. A father who finally saw the daughter he never stopped loving, sisters who turned pain into purpose, and a legacy that will never again be buried. But beneath this powerful reunion lies a truth we all must face. How many lives have been quietly rewritten, erased, because they didn't fit the narrative others chose? Let this story be a reminder. Family isn't just blood, it's truth, it's memory, it's choice, and the ones we silence often carry the most powerful stories of all. If this story moved you, if it made you feel, remember, or reflect, then help us keep telling stories that matter. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories that heal, reveal, and honor the voices that refuse to disappear. Until next time, thank you for listening, and never stop searching for what was lost.